Hello, and welcome back to Let's Talk About Conflict. My name is Lynn Nash. I am your host of this podcast, and I'm also an attorney mediator in Dallas, Texas. I have the privilege of teaching conflict resolution and alternative dispute resolution. And so this is very much in teaching mode here as we continue our series on the wonderful, wonderful book, Getting Past No, that William Ury wrote. So today, second of a 5-part series. So one's been recorded. If you haven't heard it yet, go back and listen to one. This is number 2. We've got 3, 4, and 5 waiting, but we're not there yet. So this is a second part about difficult conversations or negotiations, sometimes just a one-on-one dispute with somebody else. Getting Past No is an incredible book William Ury wrote with 5 defined strategies to help us as we work through the first no. And remember, we've talked about this. No is the simplest answer, but no isn't necessarily the answer. And I know a lot of people say, when I say no, that means no. And I definitely say that towards my children. But when you're in a negotiation or in a sales negotiation or in a negotiation with an employer or with your spouse, or where no is just not the simplest answer to be the only answer, these strategies hopefully are going to give you a place to move once you've heard the first no. So last episode, we talked about don't react, go to the balcony. And you'll listen to people talk about, I just had to go to the balcony, or I went to the balcony. That's where it comes from. It comes from this book. It's a well-established concept of saying, don't react, don't get big, don't do that knee-jerk impulse thing. Just take yourself away from it for a minute. And remember, going to the balcony doesn't mean leaving the building, right? So first pod, we talked about don't react, go to the balcony. This is from Getting Past No. Today we're going to cover don't argue, step to their side. And I know this is going to be tough for a lot of people, but trying to step to somebody's side actually will help you move the discussion and maybe even come up with the best answer. The best answer is probably a joint answer and not just your answer. But we'll get there in a minute. There are 3 more podcasts in this series, and those will come after this. So series of 5. Today we're on number 2. Don't react, go to the balcony. Okay, we can all rationalize why our point of view is correct and somebody else's is not. Okay, we can all do it. I can tell you exactly why I'm right. However, in the history of all history, telling someone they're wrong and you're right has never gotten the job done. It doesn't get the job done. So if that's your strategy and your solutions, I'm going to recommend you stop doing that and maybe listen a little bit more to what we're going to talk about today. Because before you can even get to the problem, you got to disarm the individual who gave you that knee-jerk no, right? The knee-jerk no is the easiest answer anybody gives. You listen to parents talk to their kids, the answer is no. I used to say maybe, but maybe was like truly, then they bug you so much, you just say no. It's just easier to say no. That is where they build this muscle where it's easy to say no. So before you can really get down the road, talk about the problem, talk about the solution, you're going to have to get that person, that person who immediately said no, you're going to have to disarm them a little bit. You're going to have to get them comfortable with staying in this mode to talk about whatever this issue is you want to talk about. So I think about this in the analogy of rowing a boat. All right, so we've each got an oar and there's 2 people in this boat. So if you're not sitting side by side and you're each rowing, well, you're just rowing against each other, right? And until you can get together on the same side, both put your oars in water and both pull the same way at the same time, you're really not going to get anywhere in a hurry. You might move a little bit here and there, but you're going to splash around more than anything else. Instead, what you've got to do is sit side by side, put the oars, and together set the pace and together find a rhythm so that you can row and get the boat moving. Okay. I actually really like to go use the row machines at the gym. So I like rowing as an analogy, and I talk about it a lot, but I think we understand the concept of when you're jerking on it doesn't work. It's not smooth and it's not enjoyable. But if you can get your if you can pull and keep that solid fluid motion going for a period of time, it's very enjoyable. And that's the goal here today, right? Today we are talking about don't argue, step to their side. Don't argue, sit by them in the boat. Don't argue, figure out how to find the rhythm to row together. Don't argue. So if you're not arguing, the primary thing you got to be doing is listening. It's the most critical thing. It's the most critical step in this strategy. If you're so busy thinking of your retort or what you need, and it's the most important thing, then you are not actually listening to the other side. We've talked about active listening. Active listening, you cannot be contemplating all your own thoughts. You cannot be thinking about what you're going to cook for dinner. You cannot be worrying about that other phone call you have to get on in another 30 minutes. You have to be active and you have to be listening to what the other person is saying. I was just playing a game with some friends of ours. We were playing this game, and part of the game, to be successful at the game, you really had to listen to the other team and what they were saying, because it might come back around and you might need to use that same shorthand later to help someone figure out what was on your card. And I was working with a partner who just he didn't listen to anybody. He didn't listen to anybody. And so you would use shorthand, and both the other people at the table were like, yeah, we got it. I don't know where that came from. It was so frustrating. It was kind of funny, but it was really frustrating in that I can't make someone actively listen to me, but I can make me actively listen to someone else. Okay. So do your homework before you get into a negotiation or that difficult conversation. And if you need time for a little more research, yeah, you step away, right? We talked about the balcony last time. So do your homework, know what matters to you, and know where you'd like to start. And that way you're not just focused on what you need to figure out. You've already figured that part out. And you can focus on listening to understand. Okay, don't forget this. Everybody knows this, but we don't say it enough. We hear, unless you have a biological issue, you hear, but we do not always listen. Listening is a skill, and everybody can get better. Okay. So again, don't argue. Step to their side by paraphrasing. Okay, paraphrasing and check back in to see if you got it right. To paraphrase is just repeating back things that they've said in your own words. And then checking in. Is that really what you were trying to tell me? Because maybe it isn't. And if it wasn't, if you didn't get it right, either you weren't listening or they didn't tell you something in a way that you were able to understand, and they get another chance to clarify. That's kind of fantastic. And sometimes you learn more the second time than you would have if you'd gotten it right the first time. So I use this in mediation a lot. Paraphrasing and giving the information back to people after you listen to them is a key component of being a good mediator. And so sometimes when I feel like people are not, maybe not telling me everything, I will intentionally leave out a portion of their story, because that's the piece I think I need to know more about. So when I check in, if they don't catch that I left that out, I'll add back, wasn't there something about X? I'm not sure I got all of that. And then you get them to launch back into that portion of the story. Usually that is a time where I actually learn more about that area. And that's probably the area we need to focus on. So that is why paraphrasing, checking in to make sure you got it right, restating what they're telling you from your active listening is so important, because it makes people feel heard, which is important, and it makes people feel understood. And you 100% understand them and still not agree with them. That's not the point. But you need to make sure they know that you are following. Now, not agreeing, but you need to acknowledge their point. All right. We're going back again to this. You've got to make sure they feel heard. Statements like, I can see how you might believe that, or I understand what you're saying. That just goes a really long way to creating a space, a safe space where hopefully they'll build some trust with you and share more information. Acknowledging their point is not agreeing. And I am not telling you to just agree with anything they say, and please don't, because it would be dishonest. But there are some phrases like, I can see how you might believe that, or I understand what you're saying. I hear where you're coming from. Hear that one a lot too. They're important and they're useful without saying, I agree with you. I hear you. I hear you. You need to acknowledge their feelings. I tell the students that I teach ADR to, we do all the touchy-feely stuff in my class. Okay. And this is exactly what I mean. We have to acknowledge our own feelings and maybe calm them down in a situation like this so we can acknowledge our counterpart's feelings. And you can say something like, it sounds like that made you feel in the emotion, angry, sad, frustrated, happy, whatever the right emotion is. It sounds like that. And just so it's said, I'm just going to say it. Angry is a cheap emotion. It is cheap. Yeah, I'm angry. Well, rarely when we're angry, are we just angry? Angry represents being scared or feeling vulnerable or maybe being hurt or all these other feelings. So if angry is, yes, it makes me feel angry. Take another beat and dig in a little bit more. So what is it about that that makes you, that makes anger come to mind? Well, see what they say. You know, you this or that situation that, or it makes me insecure in my company. It could be all kinds of things. But that feeling part is integral to trying to get somebody from sitting across from you in the boat to sharing the seat on the bench. You got to be on that same bench to row together. And this is how you work to get there. Offer an apology. William Ury, God bless this man, offer an apology. I'm going to tell you in mediation, one of the first things I say almost every single time to each party separately by themselves, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize for their perceived wrong. I apologize that they got sued. I apologize that they're having to be in the process of mediation because I know they don't want to be. And it is shocking to watch people. No one has said, I'm sorry to them. No one has said, I get it. You don't want to do this. I get it. I'm willing to accept that. So that apology is beginning to build that safe, constructive space where we can work on a solution together. Now, hear me when I say, don't do it and be fake about it. I didn't say, I'm sorry that so-and-so did that to you. Because that's not my job. Okay. I can say, I'm sorry that you're here when we're all okay. The lawyers, we're all good with this stuff, but you'd rather do anything else probably. And then they kind of laugh and they feel a little bit more like someone is feeling what they're feeling or is trying to connect to them. The other thing about an apology is that it might begin a reconciliation, right? So I talk about this in constructs of mediation, but if you're an apology with, well, I'll just talk about my spouse, God bless him. I talk about him a lot. If we are having this dust up, which we don't fight, we have dust ups, and I have to acknowledge that I have maybe not saying things his way, to stop and say, I'm sorry, I didn't hear it that way. This is actually how I heard it. If you are really trying to help rebuild the trust and rebuild a way to have a communication, it can be a step of reconciliation and even, cajole a little bit of an I'm sorry too out of the other person. Now, don't use this as a manipulation. I don't mean it that way. I mean, you really have to sincerely mean it or it's not going to go very far. But an apology, if you mean it, is an unbelievably useful thing. And we don't apologize near enough in this country. But then there are some people who just apologize for everything. So we got to find a balance. Okay. Agree wherever and whenever you can. Okay. Find things you can agree about. This is reflective of one of my very, very favorite methods that I teach my law students, and that is the importance of reciprocity. Most people, not everyone in the world, not everyone ever fits anything, but most people understand the rule of reciprocity, even if they didn't realize they were doing it. i.e., I held the door open for you. That left you with a sense of thank you for doing that. I had you were looking for something and I was able to hand it to you. If you are doing these sort of things out of rhythm and rote, it is going to help you build trust with the other party and get them to feel like they want to give you something back, reciprocity. William Ury talks about agreeing without conceding. Okay, so we want to focus on the things where you already have an agreement. I disagree splashes mud up on the windshield. I love that phrase. He says it splashes mud up on the windshield. Okay. So look for opportunities where you can agree and do it. That reciprocity is you agreeing with someone else and them wanting to agree back with you. Okay. Accumulate yeses everywhere you can. Say yes as often as you can. I like the word right. I tend to use that expression and say, I think this is da, 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 right. And you would agree with me that this is blah, 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 right? And they'll either say yes or no, or right or no. And if you get a no there, then you get a chance to check back in. But if you get a yes, then you can keep going. Yes, and this is a direct quote from William Ury, yes, can transform an antagonistic argument into the beginning of a reasoned dialogue. Ooh, that's so good. So as you accumulate agreements, you can create an atmosphere in which someone is more likely to say yes to a substantive proposal. Now, you can't go straight for the juggler and try and just get your deal and get out. You have to take the time and you have to build this trust and accumulate yeses. Tune into their wavelength. Okay, back to that, the feelings sort of things. But there is a concept called physical mirroring. When people lean back in their chairs, which is, I don't want to be your body language. Okay, if I'm leaning back in my chair now, okay, you will lean back in your chair. If people are really leaning forward in their chair, other people tend to lean forward in their chair. You can see, hear, listen. Those are sensory language terms. I need you to see my problem. I need you to hear me. Listen. I said, listen, the real problem is all of those are key trigger words. They're sensory language. If you can pick up on that, you can use it. So are these about feelings? It doesn't feel right. You can counter with, that doesn't make me comfortable either. What would make them feel safe, secure, in control? Fill in what they're maybe looking for with the feelings that they're telling you, right? But you really have to be practicing active listening down to minutia, such as these sensory language words. Now, I know this next one's going to seem really ridiculous, but it's true. Acknowledge the person, okay? Show this person respect with your attention. If you're checking your cell phone, oh yeah, I gotta check. If you're, I just gotta answer this thing on my email while you're on a Zoom. Everyone knows what you're doing, okay? If you're trying to build a one-on-one with somebody that you need to get through to, you put everything else on pause. Work to build a cognitive dissonance. Okay, so there's an inconsistency between perception and reality. You're working to be their friend or their colleague as you go through this process, but you can't be phony about it, right? I keep saying this, you got to be legit because everybody can smell affect, right? Everybody, when I was a kid, we had plastic Halloween costumes and like you could smell it, like there's a scent to it. So everybody knows what that smells like. But you can always distinguish when your true self and their true self show up and start working together. So you want to work from this place of genuine honesty as much as possible, which goes back to, again, did you do your homework before you got there so that you can be your true self to try and push it through? Acknowledge their authority and competency. Now, this is tough, okay? Because sometimes you're going to find yourself in a negotiation with someone that you don't find all to be maybe very competent, and you still have got to work with that person. We've all been there, and we'll all be there again. So you need to reassure them that you respect them and you respect their authority. You got to find a way to find it. Okay. You want to work on the situation and the problem. You are not challenging them. It is not about a challenge to the individual. It is about, help me work this problem, help me work this situation. If you find there's a big ego or a really sensitive, vulnerable ego involved, you need to look for the ways to satisfy their needs, that their contributions acknowledged every time. This is going to really disarm somebody and maybe get them sitting by you and pulling in the same direction, which is what all of this is about. Build a relationship which works. Okay, so take time for small talk. I hear people do this all the time. It's like, we're even gotten down to whatever. It's like, yeah, but we're making really great headway in getting to know each other. My buddy John Ship calls this talking about your cat. He says, when we're in mediation, we need to spend a little time at the beginning talking about your cat. And all he's really trying to say is, you got a cat, care about this cat. We're gonna talk about your cat. Oh, you had cat hair on your shirt. What kind of cat do you have? How old's your cat? When did you get your cat? What's the funniest thing your cat ever did? What'd your cat do this morning? Anything that starts a relationship. Okay. The best time to build a relationship is when? Before you find yourself in conflict. So your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your partner, your relationship with your children, your relationship with your boss, your relationship with somebody who's going to provide a service for you. If you have invested in building a relationship with that person, then when it's time to actually have to do an ask, they understand who's asking, and they're not wondering what your motivations are. Okay. Where are you from? Do you like college sports? Do you have kids? What are your hobbies? One of my favorite networking questions that I try and teach people to ask is not what do you do, which everyone says in a crowd, but ask people, what do you enjoy doing? It may be their job, and they may just launch into their job because they think that they're not really listening and they didn't hear what you said. I have watched people say, oh, my hobby is to XYZ. And then they tell me all about something I would never have known about them. And they were so excited to get to talk about that instead of what they do for money. Okay. People are deep and complex, and there's just a lot about them that if you take the time to build a relationship, it's going to help you every time. It's always worth your investment. Okay. Speaking of investing, here's something you can do, but you got to do it carefully. All right. Express your views, but don't provoke. Now, what does that mean? You can express your views, but don't provoke. So it's always the easy button to believe everything is either or. Yes, no, black, white. There's no gray. Frankly, most of the world is gray, in my opinion, or certainly in the world I work in. So instead of thinking, I have to win, you have to lose, you can always say, I can see why you feel the way you do. And based on everything you told me about the experience you've had before, it makes sense to me. But I need you to hear me a minute and let me tell you, I've got a really different experience. When you say that, you are making space, a safe, open space for dialogue that does not tell them they're wrong. It does not change their opinion and make you stand out as someone who's contrary to them. I think this is express views, but don't provoke. I have many people in my life that we don't have exact same political views, and they're still my friends, and they're still people I care about. And I have heard some statements made that I wasn't okay with. And my typical response is, I really just don't see it that way. I can understand where you're coming from, but I don't see it that way. And if you'd like me to, I'm happy to tell you more. If you'd like me to, not I have to be heard and I have to step on that's not going to accomplish anything. Okay. So this is the big one. And most people have heard this expression. This definitely comes out of the book, Getting Past No. But it's a really big one that you can work into your language. You have to work at it, right? Don't say but, say and. if you have to, but you really don't want to, you don't even want to be down this road, but don't say, but. I can see where you're coming from, but da 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 da, which says you're wrong, I'm right. It says no. So when my children were young and they were trying to argue their points to me, every argument they were trying to make about their points would constantly get down into this phrase that went, but mom, but mom. And you may have said this, you may have heard this, somebody else, maybe on a TV show, I don't care, but mom. And so after the second or third time they would retort, but mom, I said, first of all, my first name is not but, and my last name is no longer mom. I am not but mom. Let me say it again. But mom. No, that is not my name. My first name is not but, and my last name is not mom. So instead of saying but, I'm trying to give you something where you'll be like, ooh, don't do that. Instead of saying but, try, I understand you feel X, and I believe you want B. So instead of saying but, you're really trying, I understand, and I want you to believe. Now I'm still in there. I'm pushing mine, and I believe, I think you want. Say this instead. I understand you feel X, and I believe you want ABC. And as long as we incorporate EFG into this equation, we can start finding the edges of our solution. The solution is always going to come as a we. It is not going to be all of one author's. So giving people to work the opportunity to have authorship with you on a deal is always going to work out better. Remember, you really have a hard time rowing a boat with one oar in the water on one side. If you only have one oar, you better hope your partner's going to come sit next to you, put their oar in the water, and you guys figure out how to row together. Okay, now we can't take the people out of this. So we're back to the touchy-feely stuff. And I talk about this a lot. The easy button with feelings is to tell someone how they feel or what they are doing. Okay, right? There goes my finger is pointing forward. And you know, the old saying about pointing your finger forward is you've got three pointing back. So don't think you have all the answers, because there's three reasons maybe you shouldn't have your finger out in the first place. That's that old school stuff. People are quick to say you are always, and you failed to, and you ignored them. It's just don't do it. Don't do it. You. My kids say one of my favorite expressions, you people. Oh, and I do when I get really like irritated. I'm like, oh, you people this and you people that, and it's you. Anytime we get to say you, then it's not me and I'm not in it. Instead, you got to use an I statement, but you still need to try and limit that when you're in a negotiation or when you're trying to get past no. I feel that, I'm concerned that, I want this, I believe that. Those sort of things, they're important, but do not get real far away from you and the pointing. It's not going to help you. Don't forget that you can stand up for yourself. All right. You're the only one in a negotiation, in a relationship, in a whatever, who knows what you actually need. That's why I feelings really do matter, because that's the only way to express what's going on inside the other person. Nobody can argue with an I feel statement. They can see, like, I don't understand. It doesn't make sense that you feel that way, but they can't say you can't feel that way because they don't know. You don't need to back away from the things that you planned and what you need. You can be confident and strong, but you don't need to be aggressive about it. And it's not really helping you to get your point across. The big, aggressive, Actually, when people come at me like that, I'm like, okay, let me see if I can start pulling this apart, because there's something else going on. If you're having to be that big over the top thing, it really isn't confident and strong. It's just aggression. And aggression is just an emotion usually that's hiding something else. So be sure that when you stand up for yourself, you project confidence and not arrogance. Nobody wants to help the arrogant person, but most people want to be in the company of someone who's confident. So this is one of my favorite things. I maybe use this too much, but acknowledge differences with humor. Optimism, humor, whichever word you want to use. Ury says optimism. I say humor because I use a lot of humor. And it may become apparent as you start getting to know each other and working through these things that maybe it's not as bad as you thought. Maybe it's not as big as you thought. And you can kind of get to this and you can come back and affirm your interest in agreeing and assert that you really do believe that we can find a way through this together. And I think we can make a deal here. In mediation, I say all the time, we're really making progress. Stay with me. Just stay with me. Don't give up on this because you're tired. You can always say, yeah, I'm thinking maybe we just kind of found out maybe that wasn't the whole point now, was it? And we laugh a little bit. But I like humor. I think it can be disarming, but it has to be genuine and it can never be at the cost of another person. It can always be at the cost of the deal, of the detail of the deal, but never at the deal's cost or the person's expense. Because we are soft on the people and hard on the problem. You have to get the problem off the person so that you can work on the problem away from going after the person themselves, right? Acknowledge those differences. So, last one for today, create a favorable climate for negotiation. Okay. Bottom line, it is just easier to listen to somebody that you feel like took the time to listen to you. Think about conversations you have as you're getting to know someone. If you sit down to lunch to get to know someone and they talk about themselves nonstop for about an hour, and then they ask you a question and you answer it in one sentence, and then they launch back into another dialogue about themselves, do you feel listened to? Probably not. It's easier to be positive when somebody was positive towards you. Back to that, build the relationship. Because if you've shown some positivity and maybe some grace when they needed it, they're going to be more likely to give it to you when you need it. And it's really hard to continue to be belligerent and mean if the person you're talking with is being really calm and looking for connection. So be the calm and be the person looking for connection so that you have the ability to don't argue, but step to their side. So with that, that concludes part 2 of our 5-part series in getting past no. And of course, we want to know what you think, because one of the things I said when I started this was it was about strategies, not being an avoider, but having some tools. So go on our Instagram, send us a message, send us an email through the website, www.letstalkaboutconflict.com. Send us an email through there as well. We just want to know what you think. It'll help us do it better. And if you want to hear about some other things, let us know about that too. Again, I'm Lynn Nash. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today. I appreciate it more than you know, and we'll see you down the road.